Hi. So what I want to talk about today is that many teachers, their style is to use notes, written out notes. They usually copy it from like a textbook, or they probably get it from some other teacher, and then they just copy it onto the board, and the students just take notes and copy it down. And it's always being done like this, at even every grade level. I think that this is really not properly the way to teach. First of all, when you're teaching like that, you're basically, what's most likely going to happen is that you're going to spend a lot of time copying down all these formulas onto the board, and very unlikely you're going to have a chance to explain it. You're going to spend so much time trying to write it down and make sure you have everything written down and try to make sure it's all written out in the right places on the board. You're not going to be concentrating on whether to explain all these things. And also, because it's all written out so well, you'll assume the students will understand it easily because you wrote down all the perfect formulas from the book, and the book was written by a bunch of people who spent a lot of time on it. So you assume they're probably going to understand it. I wrote down the formulas perfectly. I copied it from the book. And the truth is, the students are not going to understand it. The textbooks are not even written for the students. They're actually written for the professors. The students are not mathematicians or historians or things like that, or scientists. The teachers are more like that. So the textbook should actually be written for the level of the students, not the teachers. The teachers don't need to learn this stuff. They should be written so a regular student could read a math textbook and understand at his level, not at a mathematician level. And also, I find when I'm teaching, I don't use any notes because I find if there's some formula I don't really know so well that I need to actually copy it down from a book, then why am I teaching it? Then I just skip that topic. You're better off sticking just to the topics that you know well, that you could teach without looking it up anywheres. Because if you don't know it and you're like a top math person, how are the students going to ever actually learn this stuff and understand it? Teachers should make the classes easier. Just explain what you know and discuss it and talk about everything you know about it. It's not a big deal to write down. I've had professors, my graduate program, or some teachers, they just copy down tons of notes, hundreds of pages. How many of them are really important or useful? Probably a lot of it is just some proof of some formula. Not many people know it. So why teach it? Spend the lesson on making sure the students understand what is the main point of what you're trying to teach. So let's say you're teaching Markov chains, which I don't actually understand very well. What's the point? What is a Markov chain? What does it mean? What can it be used for? How is it working? What is the use of it? Just understand what is the basics of it. Why are we learning it? Things like that are not taught and explained, and right away the teachers are jumping into all the advanced formulas, all the different types of Markov chains, and students don't even understand it. So how does it help students? When I teach, I just focus on. I remember my lessons. I don't need notes. The way I think of my lessons is, let's say I know there's a topic for exponentials and logarithms. Okay, those topics go hand in hand. Let's say exponentials deal with exponents. They're functions based off an exponent, like 3 to the x, 4 to the x. So the number, the input is the x, the output is 4 to the x. That's y equal to the y. And logarithms are just the opposite. It's just the inverse function. An inverse function really just means you swap the outputs with the inputs. And it's just a function that has, for the exponential, whatever inputs there are, and you have some output. For the logarithm, you take the same outputs, and then if you notice, the inputs will be the same inputs as those outputs. It's just the opposite. But teachers a lot of times will copy down, here's a formula. E to the x equals y, so ln of y equals x, and e to the inverse of y. Students, do they really understand that? When I was in college, I had teachers in calculus. They just copied down tons of formulas. I was not a mathematician then. I did not understand it. I used to look through all my notes and study it, read the textbook. I read the textbook cover to cover. I still didn't understand everything perfectly. They should just explain what is the main point of it. So with logarithms, the main point is just it's an inverse function. Sometimes two functions happen to be the opposite of each other. There's a certain method of how to actually figure out the opposite. So if you hear the logarithmic function, you want to think of it as it's the opposite type of thing. Whatever you're doing to the inputs to get the outputs, if you do the opposite thing, that would be what the other function's doing. It's just the opposite. Like a simple example would be the inverse function of 2x. Y equals 2x. The inverse is y equals x over 2. Because 2x means you multiply by 2. The opposite would be divided by 2. If you notice, if you put it in the 2x one, if you put in 3, so you get 2 times 3 is 6. And the other one, if you put in 6 divided by 2, you get 3. It's because it's like the opposite of what you're doing, so it swaps the outputs with inputs. That's all the lesson is. Okay, that's enough for today. Okay, thanks. Bye.